Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, beautiful people. It is Thursday night, November 11th, 2021. Welcome to another episode of Life with Shenita. I am Shenita Connolly, your host, and I am super excited about my guest tonight, Miss Jackie Brewton, who is a relationship expert. And I cannot wait to bring her into this conversation this evening. So please grab your children, your teens in particular, and pen and paper. Parents, gather around. You don't want to miss this conversation. It's a game changer. So, with that being said, I am going to bring Miss Brewton in so that we can start this healthy conversation. Good evening, Jackie.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can. It's just low, but I can hear you.
Okay, I have it up as far as it go. Is that still low?
Hmm.
Is that worse than when it was out? Is that
That's a
worse
little
than when
better.
it was?
That's a little better.
Okay.
Yep. Good evening.
Hey, how are you?
Good, good, good. So glad to have you. So, thank you so much for joining me tonight for this important conversation. I've asked the audience to grab pen and paper and their kids and sit down and have a listen. So, before we get started, I have icebreaker, and I do want you to share a little bit about who you are. So, I'm gonna let you do that first, and then I'm gonna do the icebreaker. How about that?
Okay.
Okay.
How does it sound? Is it okay? It's still low?
A little bit, but go ahead.
Yeah. I have mine up as high as it can go. Shanita, what year did we meet?
It
Two
had to be
thousand.
about 2004,
Okay, so
2004, 2005.
my background is I'm from South Carolina originally. I worked in corporate America and left Procter and Gamble in 2001. So I would have met you a few years after I started
Hmm.
doing what I was doing,
Hmm.
and actually left to start an after school program, which never materialized because I ended up going into schools and speaking to teenagers full time. And I've been doing that for the past 20 years. I've spoken to probably close to 200,000 teens. I've received over 17,000 letters from high school students. And I've learned a lot over the last 20 years, more than I wanted to know, actually.
Wow. Did you say 200,000 teens?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. And 17,000 letters?
Yeah, and they have just, oh my goodness. I have read letters and like just cried because of the heartbreaking stories that that I've heard from the teenagers. It's amazing what they say.
And I've watched you along the journey share stories, share letters, and share so many success stories, even in the midst of those that made you cry.
Right. Yeah,
So you're
and some of them it's because of the heartbreaking stories, and then others it's just because I'm just amazed that God would like allow me to partner with Him to bring hope to a generation of kids who many of them have no hope.
I'm so proud of you. I remember when the abstinence initiative took place with the state of Georgia, and I had my nonprofit, and you were doing your thing, and that's how we met because we were both a part of that coalition.
Right. Okay, I'm
Which
trying to share this on my page. Can you let me share it on my page?
okay,
For some reason I went to
and
your life with Shia and it's not showing up for me. Do you have it on
uh
your personal page?
I do. Yep.
See, it's still saying going on things. It's not allowing me to. It's just saying
Not
going on
allowing you to.
things.
It's not allowing you to
Yeah,
share it.
it's not allowing. It's not even. I don't even see it on your page.
Let's see. Did you go to Life with Shanita? I'm gonna tag you in it because I see it here. I'm going to see if I can share it to your page. Let's see.
Yeah, I went to Life with Shenita, and then I also went.
Share it to a friend's profile. Let's see. So while I do that, um, tell us a little bit more about Jackie, the person. I know that you're busy changing lives for teens, one person at a time, but tell us a little bit more about this South Carolina girl.
So I am the youngest of 10. I always tell people that my parents finally got it right, so they didn't have to have any more after me. Although my sister always says, no, they were just afraid they might make that mistake again. So, like, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And then my other sister said, no, the reality is because our daddy died. I was like, okay, so between those three things, I don't know.
Okay, okay, that is
Um,
too cute.
So I went to Furman University, moved to Cincinnati right after started working for corporate America. I absolutely love to travel. This pandemic has really just kind of messed me up because I love traveling internationally. So I've been home for the past 2 years, and I'm getting a little, antsy.
Right, like get me out of here.
Right, right.
So let's do a little icebreaker. So for you, do you prefer driving or flying?
Oh, definitely flying. If I have to do more than 4 hours, I just feel like I need to be in a plane. I get sleepy when I drive. So I used to read magazines while I was driving to keep me awake. Hope there are no police officers watching this. But I don't do it anymore. But
Okay,
driving is like taking a sleepy pill. So definitely flying.
flying. So home cooked meal or takeout?
I like eating home cooked meals, but if it's up to me to cook the home cooked meal, then I prefer takeout.
I feel you. Texting or talking?
Um, that's a hard one. It just depends. Um, for the longest, I hated texting, and I didn't even want my mentees to have my number because I didn't want to text me all the time. But sometimes it's like you'd rather just get a quick little text instead of you know having
So
to
it
have a wait.
depends on the
So it
on the
depends.
situation.
Right, right.
Dress or casual attire?
Casual, definitely casual. I don't dress up a lot.
Single or married?
Single.
Okay, so thank you for indulging in that conversation with me. And so let's talk a little bit more about your purpose. And how receptive are you to your message about making good choices in their relationships?
So the name of my company is Motivation in 3D, and the 3D stands for Dreams, Decisions, and Destiny. And so I say my purpose is to empower teenagers to dream bigger dreams, make better decisions, so they can fulfill brighter destinies. And so the topic that I talk about the most is choices in a relationship as it relates to sex. And I'll tell you that I have been pleasantly surprised how receptive teenagers are um, when you present it in the right way. I have more pushback from adults than I do from teenagers. Adults always tell me I'm wasting my time. Kids are going to do it anyway. That whole,
Mm-hmm.
kind of line of
Mindset.
thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because when I tell the kids in the classroom, I said, y'all know there are a lot of adults who tell me that I'm wasting my time and they laugh at me when they find out what I do because they don't think that you have enough discipline and self control to not have sex. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
often hear from the teenagers? They say just because they can't do it doesn't mean we can't do it. So they take it as a personal challenge to say we are going to prove them wrong.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So
So
it's like I said, it's been a pleasant surprise. 'Cause I'll tell you when I first started doing this, I only talked to girls. Because the organization that I'm working with, it was eighth graders, and I talked to girls, and the guy would talk to the guy. And then when we did high school classes, the high school classes, co-ed. So for a while
Can you come closer to the microphone, your speaker? Because it's for some reason it's fading in and out. And I know you said something that was really powerful just then. You,
Um, you know what?
that's
Let me
better.
let me take the AirPods out. Is that better? Is
Yes.
that better? Or you want me
Hmm.
to take the AirPods out and just try to get the speaker in the computer?
Yeah, that's better. I can hear you clearer now.
Um, I was just saying that I was very leery when I started talking to the high school students because they were older and probably had already had sex. So it's one thing to try to talk an eighth grade girl out of having sex who hasn't started, but I thought it would be a much bigger challenge to talk somebody out of having sex who has been sexually active. And I have been pleasantly surprised how easy it has been. And I'm not going to say easy because it's not like I talk all of them out of it, but many more than I ever expected in their letters have told me that, you know, I just knew that no one was going to come in here and get me to stop having sex, but you did it.
Wow,
So, and I
that's
have to say,
amazing.
it's a God thing. It's a God thing.
It is definitely a godsend. So, what do you attribute to the amount of teen sexual activity that we see today? And what have you found to be the most effective strategy to decrease the amount of teenage sexual activity?
So I think a lot of it, and actually, I have to say that there are less teens having sex today than there were in 1991. There are less teens who are getting pregnant today than there were in 1991. So
Mhm.
a lot of people, adults, just believe that this generation is worse than ever any generation has ever walked the face of the earth, and that's just not the reality. Because if you look at the statistics that are put out by the CDC, every 2 years, the youth behavior survey, the amount of teen sexual activity is going down, the amount of teen pregnancy rate is going down. But I think what is probably different is I think it's starting at younger ages, and so teens are having more sexual partners because they're starting so early. Because the younger they start having sex, I mean, it just goes to you know play out that they'll probably have more sexual partners. And
Mhm.
so I think that some things have contributed to it. Pornography. I think that kids are being educated about sex. A lot of them through Pornhub, and I think the amount of girls, especially who are growing up without fathers, because I think sex is a symptom of much bigger issues. And so, in some of the letters that I get, especially from young ladies who tell me why they started having sex, is they'll say, "This was the first guy who made me feel special." And if you think about it, in a healthy society, a girl's father would be the first one that made him feel special. But if the father's not there, then they're going to like look for that validation in a
Mhm.
relationship, and that's never good.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of the low self esteem, and then you add social media to it, and so I mean, you think about it. Before social media, it's like I think the amount of teenagers who felt like everybody was doing it was that number wasn't as high, but with social media and everybody seeing everybody's life and seeing stuff that's not even real life, but just stuff that's put out
Mhm.
there. I think then it becomes where it's not even necessarily external peer pressure, but I think it's internal peer pressure. So it's the pressure that teens are putting on themselves because they don't want to be different. And so when I have a seventh grade, eighth grade girl who tells me that she was beginning to think that her virginity was a burden that she no longer wanted to carry anymore, like that's a problem. Like you're 13 years old and you're thinking that being a virgin is a negative thing.
Right.
And a lot of that comes from the media and
Mhm.
social media and all this reality television and a lot of that. So teens are having less sex, but they're having it earlier, and I think they're having more sexual partners, and they have a lot more influences than we might have had in the past with social media, with pornography, and with all of that stuff. So what I've found has been effective to get them to reconsider their choices. One has been to teach towards something and not away from something.
Mhm.
And so we have tried to change teenage behavior for years using 2 words. do and get. So we talk about consequences. We say if you do this, you'll get that. And I think they need to know about consequences,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think that's the best motivation to try to get them to have sex because fears can be conquered. And if they are only making their decision not to have sex out of fear in the heat of the moment, they are not going to be thinking about, oh, I could get an STD or pregnancy might happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there are two better words that we can use to change teenage behavior long term. Because if you talk about consequences, that might change their behavior short term, but it's only
Mm-hmm.
temporary.
Mm-hmm.
But the two better words, I think, are see and feel. How do you see yourself? How do you feel about yourself? Because until they see and feel about themselves the way they should, they will make all kind of bad decisions. They won't even realize that it's costing them something. Because I
Great.
always say they only consider something an at-risk behavior if they think they're risking something. They only
Absolutely.
protect the future if they think they have a future. And so
That's good.
we gotta teach towards something and not away from something.
I like that approach. What has been your biggest surprise over the past 20 years of speaking with teens, or in regards to teens' behavior? What has been the biggest change in what we see today than what we've seen in the past?
Um, I think one of the biggest surprises would be that they actually are receptive to a message of being responsible and making decisions for their future and not just for the present. And I think the biggest change that I've seen over the last 20 years has been how aggressive the girls have become.
Yes,
Because,
they are.
we used to talk to girls about refusal skills. And we would say, if they say this, you say this. If they say, if you love me, you would, you say, this is what your response should be. Now I have to talk to guys about refusal skills. And I have teenage boys who bring their girlfriends to me after class to get me to convince their girlfriend why they should stop having sex. And that I don't think that was the case 20 years ago.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
and I attribute a lot of that to the media.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not one of those people that says the media is all evil, which is, it's some truth
Right.
to it.
Right.
But even here's the thing that's interesting, and I had kids tell me this yesterday when I asked them, because one of the first questions I'll ask is, do you think we have a healthy culture in our society as it relates to sex? And they all say no, because they know it's not healthy. And so then when I ask them, I'll say, what do you think contributes to the culture that we have that is so jacked up,
Mhm.
jaded, so
Mhm.
messed up?
Mhm.
And I
Right.
just had a girl yesterday say, I think it's the music we listen to. I think it's the music, the media. I think, and they're like, even kids' cartoons now.
Yeah.
Like, there are all these sexual
Subliminal
innuendos.
messages.
Yeah, it starts so early.
Mhm.
And so now you have, kids. One of the things we talk about in class, and I don't know if you ever saw this in the news, but they fired a teacher in California because the teacher left the class unattended and two students did oral sex in front of the rest of the class. And the students were in the second grade, 7 years old.
I missed that one, but I'm not surprised.
And so we talk about that. I shared it with the students, and I will tell them, I'll say, what do you think influences kids at 7 to do that? And one of the things they say, which I think is interesting, is they say parents give their kids technology too young. And I agree.
Yep. Yep.
And so the kids will say, when I have kids, that's another question I ask often in the class is, how will you parent differently? And one of the responses that I often get is, I'm not going to use technology as a babysitter for my kids. I'm
Mhm.
not going to give them technology so soon because, kids happen upon pornography a lot of times by accident. And it doesn't have to
Mhm.
be, it can be any device where they have access to the internet.
Yep.
I have a friend
Ye-
who's a youth pastor, and I have a friend who's a youth pastor, and he did a presentation to parents about the dangers of pornography. And he had a dad come back to him and say, I didn't think I had anything to worry about, but you got me scared. So I went and checked my son's iPod. So this is probably 11 years ago because kids don't even really use iPods anymore. He
Mhm.
found 2 weeks worth of graphic history where his son had been visiting graphic porn sites where a kid can happen upon it by accident. Because they know that if a kid happens
Get them
upon it by
hooked.
accident, they're likely to have a customer for life. So when you have 6-year-olds who are being exposed to pornography, we can't be surprised that by the age of 7 or 8, they're acting out what they're seeing
Absolutely.
when they're watching the pornography.
I actually hosted a fundraiser at Bubba Cathy's house some years ago in Clayton County, and I'll remember him and his wife saying, "We did not have TVs in our house because we were not going to allow anyone else to influence our children. We wanted to influence them, and we wanted them to be thinkers and not to be dependent on media." And so, they said, yeah, they couldn't control when they visited their friends' homes, but at their home, they were not going to be influenced by it. And so we see the influence today, or hey, we've seen it for years, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. The exposure, and we're not having conversations about what we should do or shouldn't do when we see it before they're exposed.
Right, right. Because I tell parents, I say it's not a matter of if your child will, end up seeing pornography. It's a matter of when. And
When?
speaking of what you just said about them not having televisions in their house, I heard a preacher say one time, and I thought this was brilliant. He said, if a stranger came into our house and started teaching our kids values that went against the values that we taught them, we would throw that stranger out. But we allow the television, and you can replace that with television, internet, whatever kind of technology, that we allow the television to do that every single day, where they come in and teach our kids values that go against
What we
what we
believe.
will, yeah, what we will believe, and it's just, and I
It
think
is.
we're seeing the outcome of that.
Yes, we're seeing it. We're seeing it because, like you said, the Bible talks about being weaker. The younger they are, the weaker they are. And we see that each generation, we see that happening. And so we've got to make some different choices in order to see a difference. I mean, I I'm always perplexed in it because I have grandchildren now. And so I'm concerned, and so I try to have candid conversations, but I'm certainly concerned. And I have conversations with my girls about their children.
Yeah, it's scary, and it's funny because when I talk to the kids in the classroom about open pornography, the one thing I'll say to them is the reason pornography is such an issue is because there's a great demand for it, because the demand fuels the supply. And I said, when teenagers and adults place a demand on porn, you can't control whether the same porn that you place a demand on gets in the hands of 5, 6, 7-year olds. And I
That's it.
said, I've always heard that if you're not part of the solution, that means you're part of the problem. And
Right.
so I'll never forget a young man said in front of the class one day, he said, yeah, I watch porn. He said, but just because I stopped watching porn doesn't mean they're going to stop making porn. He said, I'm just one person. And I said, I read a quote by Edmund Burke that said, nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. And I said, every change we've ever had in our culture started with one person. And I
One
said, as
person.
long as everybody sits back and sees things that are really bad and say, wow, things are really bad, somebody needs to do something about it. And I'll tell the kids, I'll say, when I look at all of you in the classroom, guess what y'all look like to me? Somebody. So I said, if you stop watching porn and you influence 10 of your friends to stop watching porn, and they influence 10 of their friends to stop watching porn, I said, that's how change happens.
Hmm.
Change starts with when you change your behavior. And then you influence the people in your sphere of influence to change their behavior. I said, but if you look back and see a problem and you think you're going to try to change the problem, it seems really daunting. And I think, and I'll tell you, one of the reasons why I think I have been as effective as I have with kids is because the conversation that I have with them in the classroom are those kind of conversations where I challenge them. And I'm not just standing there saying, if you have sex, you're going to die. If you have sex, you're going to get an STD. If you have sex, it's a much bigger picture. As a matter
Right.
of fact, one of the things I say to them is, if the only thing that you hear while I'm here during these 3 hours over 2 days is that you shouldn't have sex, then I did not do my job. I said,
Hmm.
because it's so much bigger than sex for me.
It's
This
bigger
is
than
about
that.
helping you live up to your fullest potential. And that's what parents have to do. They have to make a conversation that they have with their kids so much bigger than sex. It has
Hmm.
to be about protecting their future
Right.
and helping them set goals, helping them have a vision for their life. Because if they're just trying to talk them out of something, you give up one thing without having a benefit of something. Talk
Hmm.
about the
Hmm.
benefit just as much as they, or more, I would say, than they talk about the consequences.
Yes.
It, it's
Yes.
just it just works really effective. And I'll tell you another thing. This kind of goes back to your question. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
Stop me if I'm talking too much.
No, no, no. This is good.
So another thing that has really surprised me is, we always think about the fact that teenagers are selfish. We hear kids, and I'm not
Hmm.
saying that they don't behave selfishly sometimes,
Hmm.
but one of the biggest shocks that I've had that has been effective is when I talk to them about what do you want for your future kids. And so if we're trying to talk them out of having sex because of what could happen to them, they think they're invincible. Oh, I'm never going
Hmm.
to get the STD. Oh, I'm never going to get pregnant or get somebody pregnant. But if
Hmm.
you start to talk to them about the fact that, do you want your kids to have a better life than you have?
Hmm.
And even kids who come from a great home, they still want their kids to have a better life than they have.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I
Hmm.
talk about like nothing magical is going to happen when you become an adult that puts you in a position to be a great parent. And
Hmm.
I help them understand how the choices that they're making right now, that these choices are going to determine what kind of life their kids are going to have. And this whole,
Absolutely.
the decisions you make in the first 20 years of your life will determine how you'll spend the next 60. All right, and you can take that to
Absolutely.
the bank. And so what I started reading in their letters was um, things like, you make me think about my kids, what kind of life I want them to have. And I realized that if I keep having sex, especially like boys who come from homes where their fathers aren't there, they'll say, if I keep having sex, I am potentially putting a future kid in the same situation that I'm in that I don't even enjoy. And so even though I do think they might have some selfish ways to them, when it comes to, they're more willing to not have sex because of the outcome on their future kids than the outcome on themselves. That has been a shocker for me.
Wow, that is awesome. That is awesome. It's about perspective, changing their perspective, challenging them to look at things
Right.
differently. So, as we're talking about that, let's help the parents. What can parents do to make it less likely that their teens will become sexually active? What can parents do?
I think the first thing is have a conversation. When I ask students, how many of you have had the sex talk with your parents? Without fail, it is rarely more than 50% of the kids in the class. And sometimes it's even lower than that. So just have a conversation
Mhm.
and don't make the conversation. And the conversation, this is one thing that the kids say when I say, like, how was it? They'll say awkward. And I'll say, what made it so awkward? And one of the things is because he'll say, because they waited too late. They're
Yes.
like, by the time they had a conversation with me, they're like, I was already
Right.
having sex.
Right. Right.
And so that was kind of awkward because I didn't want them to know I was having sex, but I'm trying to sit there and listen to what they're saying and they're whatever. And so I tell them, I say, don't start with a conversation about sex. Start with a conversation about healthy relationships. And that conversation can start really young, age appropriate, but
Mhm.
it can start young. Because if you're waiting to have a conversation about sex and you haven't had any kind of conversations up to that point, and you just come right out and say, like, are you having sex? Or when, that is going to be awkward. But if
Mhm.
you have been having age appropriate conversations all along about healthy relationships, and you can use the media to start the conversation.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there are plenty of opportunities. I mean, from the positive and the negative. like you're watching something on the media, or listen to their music with them.
Mhm,
Like
mhm,
turn out the lyrics of the music, because you know what they
mhm.
always say. It's not the lyrics. I just like the beat,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
And I'm like, there's no way that you can listen to that song and those
And not
lyrics
here.
coming getting into your psyche
Mhm,
and
mhm,
changing how you think, what you think you're supposed to do in a relationship.
mhm.
And so having those kind of conversations, and but at an early age, talk about healthy relationships, talk about what real love is. I had a guy that I interviewed once, and he had a daughter who was, I don't know, I think she was maybe 10 at the time. And so I asked him, how do you how do you have this conversation with her? And so he gave an analogy that I love, and he said the way they teach bank tellers how to recognize counterfeit money is they make them study the real money. He said they don't give them counterfeit money and say, if you see this, this is not the real thing. He said they give them the real money and they have them study the real money for so long that they will recognize anything that doesn't look like that.
I
So
love
he
it.
said, what I do with my daughter is I show her what real love is. So that when somebody comes along and says, if you love me, this is what you need to do, she's not going to fall for that because I've already shown her what real love looks like.
Mhm, mhm.
And so even if it's a single mom who doesn't have the dad there, like find somebody that can have that conversation, somebody that you trust, because you know nowadays you got to be really
Right.
particular about like who you trust to go into your child's life. But find somebody that you trust that they can have a conversation, because one of the best protective factors
Mhm.
to keep girls from having sex is a father in their life or an older male sibling. You know, where they're showing them what the game is.
Mhm.
You know, they're showing them, you know, this is what this means when they do that. Because let me tell you, so much of the sex that happens, it's not that the person went there planning to have sex. They just got caught up in a situation that they didn't see it coming. And
Mhm.
next thing you know, I mean, I've had adult women when I've been doing my presentations who would talk to me afterwards and
Mhm.
say, that is, I'll never forget this one young lady. She says, that's exactly how I ended up losing my virginity. She said, I didn't know what the person was planning. Like, I just, and by the time I realized what was happening, I didn't know how to get out of it. And I felt awkward and I felt like, okay, I'm going to get them upset if I stop now after they've
Mhm.
gotten started. But it
Mhm.
was never her intention to lose her virginity that night. It was just things got out of control
Mhm.
in her mom. And she's like, I would never say that he raped me. She's like, but I just let it happen, but I didn't plan for it to happen.
Right.
If that makes sense. And I
And
think
it
that's
does
very,
make sense.
I
It
think it's
still
very
happens. It still happens today with adults.
yeah, I think it's very common. And so if they have a conversation up front with somebody to say, when this starts to happen, let me tell you what this is a precursor to.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
always tell the kids, I say, the time to demonstrate self control is not in the bedroom.
No,
The time to demonstrate self control is to keep you out of the bedroom.
that's it.
And talk to them about having a plan. And all of this doesn't just apply to girls. I told you, guys have to have a plan too.
Yeah.
Because what guys say to me is, Miss Jackie, we're caught between a rock and a hard place. Said if we don't try to have sex with our girlfriend, she's gonna think one of three things. She's gonna think we're gay, she thinks we're cheating, or she thinks we don't find her attractive. So now you have sex happening when it wasn't necessarily what either one of them wanted to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
They just thought that they didn't have a choice
Yeah.
because so much of the sex is happening out of obligation
Yeah. Yeah.
or out of I didn't want to be rejected. I didn't want to, you know, I it's
And it goes back to what you said about healthy relationships. So if you understand healthy relationships, you can extract that physical part from it and still have a healthy relationship. But we don't teach that. And so
right.
what you were mentioning earlier about media shows them, porn shows them, it sells everywhere you turn. You can't even drive in the car without the radio commercials being Viagra or whatever. I mean, it's everywhere. And so you're right. The conversations need to be had at home. We need to make sure that we are talking with our children, our grandchildren about what a healthy relationships looks like. Because I think it's important for a boy girl interaction to take place and for them to know that it's normal and it's healthy. You can have, you can like somebody, and that's a healthy interaction with boundaries. If
Yeah.
that, you know what I mean?
And the thing, here's another thing that I think parents don't understand, that because a lot of parents don't give their kids boundaries. You know, we want them to have everything that we didn't have. And so we never tell them no. We never, whatever they want, they get it. And so then when they become a teenager, we try to get them to set their own boundaries, and they've not had any experience with having boundaries their whole
In the
life.
home. Yeah.
Like I had a 16-year-old girl, because I talk a lot about boundaries in the classroom, and she said, I've decided for the first time in my life that I need to set some boundaries. And she said, this is going to be hard for me because I've never had any boundaries given to me before. And that is a tragedy, to have a 16-year-old girl for the first time understanding why there needs to be boundaries.
Because
And
everything is yes, 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 yes. You can have, yes, 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 yeah, yeah. It's a
And so they
setup.
have to understand that I'm going to tell you no, so that when you get older, you can say no to yourself. And
Yes.
so now we have all of these addictions happening because of lack of self control, because parents aren't teaching their kids and helping their kids understand the importance of delayed gratification, the importance of impulse control, self control. And so we set them up for
Setup.
failure
It's a setup.
when they get in relationships, when we don't start establishing these things when they're younger.
Hmm.
And it starts so young. Um, there's a study called the marshmallow test, where it was done at Stanford University or Columbia University, one of the Ivy League schools. And this
Hmm.
was way back in the 90s probably, where they took these 4-year-olds and they gave each girl one marshmallow, and they said, you can eat this one marshmallow now, or if you don't eat it now, when I come back in 10 minutes, you can have two, so you can have twice as much. They were trying to figure out, do these kids as young as 4 have self control? Do they have impulse control? Do they understand the benefit of delayed gratification? And they had a video camera on the kids. One little boy that only couldn't eat the marshmallow, he had turned his back to it. One sat there and smelled it the whole time. One, I mean, and in the end, 2/3 of the kids didn't eat the marshmallow, a third of them did. So 2/3 had self control, a third didn't. 14 years later, they went back and they found those 4-year-olds. They're 18 years old, they're seniors in high school. That was their plan from the very beginning. It was a long term study to decide, does self control predict success? And they measured about 5 areas: grades, whether or not they got in trouble with the law, whether or not their girls got pregnant. In every area, the kids that had self control when they were 4 fared far better than the kids who did. The area that was most profound was SAT scores. This is when the max SAT was 1600. On average, the kids that did not eat the marshmallow, their SAT scores were 210 points higher than the kids who did.
Wow.
Because self control is a character trait.
It
And if
is.
they
It
demonstrated
is.
in one area, it pays huge dividends in every area of their life. And I
Hmm.
always tell the kids, I said, let me tell you the area that is the most difficult, it's your hormones, because that's natural. And I said, but if you can control your hormones, everything else is a piece of cake. The
Hmm.
other thing I'm talking about, there's a quote I love about Andy Stanley that says, when you give up something now for something better later, that's not a sacrifice, that's an investment. And so I talked about investing in their future, investing in their future marriage. And I said, because guess what? Even after you get married, you're going to need to have self control. I said, because the consequences, I mean, the attractions, the appeal, other attractive people don't go away just because you said 2 words, I
That's
do.
right.
You're not giving self control as a wedding gift. And I
That's
said,
it.
so if you don't have it now, how do you know that you're going to have it later? Those are the kind of conversations that I'm having with them in the classroom that make it click. And nobody's having those kind of conversations with them. Like we're
Hmm.
just we're just talking about the mechanics of sex,
Right.
and this is what you need to do to protect yourself, or this is what all this kind of stuff. But it's, to me, sex is a symptom of a much bigger issue.
It is.
And
It
it's,
is.
and we can talk about a much greater chance
Mhm.
of getting them to make good choices. And I've been doing this long enough that I've been able, thank goodness, to see the fruit of my labor. I'll never forget a few years ago, I was in Marshall's dressing room and I had a 24-year-old young lady. I remember her face from Marietta High School. And she came in the dressing room and she's like, oh my God, Miss Jackie, I didn't think I'd ever see you again. She said, I just wanted to say thank you. She said, I was hoping that I would get to tell you thank you someday. And she said, I'm 24 years old and I'm still a virgin, all because of what I learned when you taught us at Marietta High School. And she said, when I was in college, she said, all of my friends, would say, wow, we wish we could do what you do. We wish we could, we wish we could, we just can't do it. And she said, I said, what, have self control? She's like, because that's what it boils down to. She's like, you can do it. It's called having
Mhm.
self control.
Self-control. And
And
that
so,
is a character trait.
yeah. And 2 years later, when I was doing my master class last spring, because I got her number in the dressing room, and I was like, I might need to use you one day. Like, give me your contact information. So when I was doing my master class, and I brought a teen girl on to share her story, one of the moms who was attending with her daughter in the master class, she said, can my daughters, can they, the girls see both sides? Like, you brought somebody who had a consequence, can you bring somebody who benefited from their choice? And so
Mhm.
I was like, oh yeah. I'm like, let me. And so I'm going to my contact list, going, what was that girl's name? Who?
Right,
And so
right,
I'm sending a text, and I'm like, are you the one I met in the dressing room at Marshall?
right.
And so I called her and I said, I'm doing a master class. They want to see us. The mothers want to see their daughters to see a story of somebody who made good choices and share, how it benefited
Mhm.
you.
Mhm.
And so she said, well, Miss Jack, and it was 2 years later. So at this point, she's 26. And so I said, she says, well, I just want you to know I've had a development since I talked to you 2 years ago. And I was like, oh, Lord, she ain't a virgin anymore. I don't know about this. And she's like, I'm still a virgin. She said, I'm getting married in 2 weeks. And so I'm like, that's even better. And
Yes.
so I ended up interviewing her. And the interesting thing was that she was a virgin and her fiance wasn't. And I said, do you think he would allow me to interview him? I said, because I'm really curious to see why he waited on you, but not the other girls.
Mhm.
And so their story was just so amazing.
Amazing.
And
Yeah.
he said, because I wanted her, and whatever she said it took for me to get her, I was willing to do it. He said, if she had told me that I had to go to church 7 days a week with her, I would have done it because that's
Mm.
how bad I was. And I'm like, girl, did you hear it? Like, if they don't think you're
Love
worth
it.
the wait, why would you think they're worth the date? I'm like,
I
let
love
them
it.
know how much they think you're worth. He just said, if she told me to go to church 7 days a week, I would have done it because that's how much I wanted her. He's like, yeah, what's up? And she said he never pressured her.
I love it. I love it. This is some great work and such needed work. And I'm hoping one day we're going to be able to do something bigger together in terms of a conference or something. But with that being said, I want you to share your two books. I know you have one for boys, one for girls. I want you to share that with the audience because I want them to know of all the goodness that's going on.
So I have one book that's released right here, Seven Secrets Guys Will Never Tell You, a teen girl's guide on love, sex, and relationships. And that one was released in 2015. And it's funny because I was hearing guys say things in class that when they would say, their guys have just been so honest. Like, they're more honest than I would ever expect in class
Mhm.
about how they feel about girls.
Mhm.
And I would say, wow, I wish I had a video camera, and I wish every girl in the world could hear what these guys just said. And so I decided, well, I don't have a video camera, but I can put it in a book. So I wrote the book. And here's the thing that has amazed me about this book, and I have a book for teen boys coming out in January. But
Mhm.
what has amazed me about this book is, even though I wrote it for girls, it's resonating with guys. And so I talk in the book about the fact that there are three types of guys that are out there: the player, the good guy, and the best guy. And so I'll say the player is the guy who doesn't care about you, all he wants is sex. The good guy is a guy who really does care about you. He may even ask for sex because he just doesn't know. He's been socialized by the same
Mhm.
media you've been socialized by. And he just believes that's how he's supposed to prove that he
Mhm.
cares about you. I
Mhm.
said, but the difference is once he gets the I'll let you
Mhm.
decide. So he feels like, okay, I didn't pressure her. And I say, but the third kind of guy is the kind of guy that most girls don't think he is, and that's the best guy. That's the guy that only wants what's best for himself and whoever he's dating. So even if you try to get him to have sex, he would turn it down because he's going to do what's best for you, even when you won't do what's best for yourself.
Love it.
And I say the enemy of best is not bad, the enemy of best is good. So the thing that'll keep you from getting the best guy is not going to be the player, because you can recognize game. It's going to
That's
be the
it.
good guy. It's going to be the guy that'll say, I'll let you decide. I'll wait till you're
Mhm.
ready. And
Mhm.
you're all flattered because he didn't pressure me. I said, but you
Yes,
still settled because the one that was the best guy would have with your best interest before his sex interest. Like he even if you offered, would have sex. So I read that portion in the class, and this is what amazed me. I started getting letters from guys saying I was a good guy because I thought that was the best that was out there. But now that you told me that there's the best guy is possible, I'm gonna stop just saying if you offer it, I'll take it. I'm not gonna have sex with him. And I was like, I never expected like that to be an outcome from the book, that guys were gonna be challenged to become a best guy because they thought a good guy was good enough.
I
That's
love it.
just amazing.
I love it.
So in the book for boys, okay, you got something you want to say before I get to the
Mm-mm.
second
I
book?
was just gonna say, as we're closing in, because I want you to get that second book out, and I got two more questions, great ones that I want to ask you.
Okay, so the book for boys, and guys started saying, "Where's our book?" You know, and everybody says guys don't read books, but the guys were asking in class, "Okay, you got a book? Then where's our book?" So, because there are also things that guys say that I wish other guys heard too, because the guys don't often hear about the regret that guys have from having sex.
Mm.
They all, everybody, they think, oh, it was all good. They brag about it. So this book is 20 chapters, and they're short chapters, probably anywhere from four to 10 pages, not long chapters at all.
Mhm.
And it's the 10 worst reasons why teen guys had sex and the 10 best reasons why they abstained. So I talk about, again, the consequences and the benefits. And at the end of each one of the 20 chapters, there are 5 self-reflection questions that they can go back and apply what they just read to their, think about my own life and what
Mhm.
does manhood mean to me?
Mhm.
And I think probably the biggest opportunity for this book is for mentoring groups for teen boys. It's almost like a 20-week curriculum because they
I
can
love it.
take a chapter out of that book every week and have a full conversation with, like, I've basically given them a leader guide, with the
I
book
love
to
it.
be able to use it with boys as well. But anyway,
I love it. I love it. So I'm hoping that parents will grab these books for their boys and their girls. I know that you have done some amazing work in the schools, but you've also done some amazing work with conferences with Steve and Margie Harvey conference, right?
yeah, I spoke for the Girls Who Rule the World is Margie Harvey's organization. I spoke with them for about 9 years, and I spoke for Steve's mentoring program for boys. I've spoken at his camp for boys back in 2012. I think was the year I spoke for his boys, and
Mhm.
he had a policy that no woman was going to come and speak for his boys because these boys were being here at home, and they hear from women all the time. And so after I spoke to Marjorie 2 or 3 times, I think, like, she was able to convince him to let me come and talk to the boys. But yeah, so
Awesome.
that was about 9 years.
That's now that's a big deal. So, I know that's a huge accomplishment, but do you have any additional hopes for yourself professionally in terms of accomplishing things? What's on the horizon?
Oh Lord, there are days when I get really tired, and I'm like, okay, Lord, who can I pass this baton to? So my goal is to create as many resources, and the thing that the pandemic actually the blessing in disguise for me with the pandemic is that it allowed me to go virtual to reach more teens. So I have a master class on our website for teen girls and a master class for teen guys. The first time I did the master class for teen girls was in right after the pandemic started, was in April of 2020. I had
Mhm.
girls from 48 states in the United Kingdom that attended. And then when I did the
Nice.
one for boys, I had boys from, uh, what did I say? How many states did I say?
48.
I'm not 48 states, I'm sorry. From 14 14 states in the United Kingdom. And then when I did the one for boys, I had them from 13 states in the United Kingdom. So, and I'm actually
Awesome.
speaking next Saturday. I am doing a virtual presentation for a girls program in Uganda. So the internet is just amazing. With
I
virtual
love
kids,
it.
I prefer in person, but the reach, I cannot deny the reach of the whole, virtual environment. It's just allowing me to reach. So what I started out to say was I started an academy called Jackie B Academy that houses all of my master classes. So I have the master class for girls, master class for guys. I have a dating boundaries one-on-one virtual guide for girls. I have e-course for moms, how to have the tough conversations where they talk to their dogs about
Mhm,
pornography, about sexual
mhm,
abuse, and
mhm.
about how do you talk to your daughter about waiting if you didn't. Because that's one thing that I hear a lot from moms to
I
say,
love it.
I feel like I'm a hypocrite if I tell my daughter not to have sex and she knows I had sex because I had her when I was a teenager. And I
Mhm,
say, when you
mhm,
tell your daughter don't do as I do, that's a hypocrite. When you tell her don't do as I did, that's a teacher. And so
mhm.
all of those, and I'm just getting ready to release a master class for an e-course for moms called How to Raise a Daughter That's Fab, Focused, Authentic, and Brave. So all of those will be on my Jackie B Academy website. And some of them are still, still in process. But by the end of the year, I should have all of those out there as well. And my book will be available in January for boys.
And I was just about that's just amazing. I was just about to ask you, what some future engagements, but they can go to your website and see what's up next and purchase copies of the book and reach you if they want you to speak somewhere, all of that, right?
Right. Yeah. And my goal is to have the resources so that even when I decide that, because I realize I have a shelf life. Like kids are not going to consider me cool forever. I'm surprised they still consider me cool today.
Right.
So I know I have a shelf life, and so I want to have the resources. I'm just busy trying to create, resources so that even if I'm not physically able to go, go talk to the kids, that there'll
Mhm.
still be resources where the message can still, go forth, even even if I'm not physically there.
I love it. That's so awesome. You're so awesome. So, anything you want to share with parents or teens that may see this today, tomorrow, next year?
Um, I would just say for parents, don't lower your expectations for your kids, and don't give up on them. Like kids will live up or down to our expectations. And I
Mhm.
think one of the reasons why we're seeing what we're seeing is because we have low expectations for them. And so I would tell parents to raise your expectations about what you expect from your kids, and they will rise to the occasion. Kids want to be challenged. They really do want to have boundaries. And you might not think they do. They want to have a relationship with you. And if you think, their kids are more important, their friends are more important than I am, like just get in the trenches with them, let them decide what they want to do when you hang out, but establish that relationship. To me, that's the most important thing is having a relationship because I've read somewhere that said rules without a relationship equals rebellion, but a
Ooh.
relationship without rules equals promiscuity. And so positive parenting is when you have rules in conjunction with a healthy relationship.
And that is so true because I experienced that as a parent because I was rules, 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 and did not have the solid relationship when they were younger because I was too busy trying to make sure that they didn't make the same mistakes I did. So the approach was not good. So I learned the hard way. And so you're on it. So many parents and families are going to be impacted continuously. Like you said, you have resources; they can grab CDs or the material, even if you're not there, and continue to
Yeah.
implement that in their households and in schools and in community nonprofits, boys and girls clubs. I mean, it's endless. And I
Yeah. And
said that you were changing. You're changing people one person at a time, changing
I'm
lives one
trying.
person at a time.
I'm trying, and I always say, even if there's just one kid in the class that makes a better decision because they heard me, then it was worth my time being there.
It's worth your time. So
Yeah.
you're doing some meaningful work, and I so appreciate who you are and what you do. I enjoy just watching and reading every letter, every comment, because it really helps me in my thought process with my grands and other kids that I may come in contact with. So thank you for the sacrifice, because this truly was a sacrifice. And like you said, it was ordained for you to leave corporate America and jump, as Steve said. You jumped.
Yeah. I landed somewhere different than where I thought I was going to land, but it was all in God's plan. He was like,
Yeah,
yeah. Go ahead with your little plan you think you got.
right. And you've been on this journey, did you say 14 years?
20 years. This is
20
my 10th
years. 20 years. This year. 20
Yeah,
years
October,
this year.
October 2001 is when I left Procter & Gamble.
Oh, wow. And it's been a wonderful, and you still look great.
I feel like I've aged a lot in the last 20 years.
But you know, one thing that I've learned about youth, they keep you young.
Yeah, you know what? I used to say that until they started saying stuff to me like, "You look good for your age." I'm like, "How to say for your age?" So sometimes I think I may be young, and other times I'm like, "Okay, y'all just made me feel old."
Oh, I love it. Well, I so appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. I'm hoping that people will reach out to you. Your website is there, www.jackiebrewton.com. The Facebook page, of course, is Motivation in 3D. And tell us again what the D's stand for.
Dreams, decisions, and destinies, empowering teens to dream bigger dreams, make better decisions, and fulfill brighter destinies.
I love it. I love it. And then you have an Instagram page as well.
Yeah, the Facebook page is typically has stuff specifically for parents. I started out like I would tell the kids to follow me on Instagram because I don't do Snapchat, TikTok, and all that.
Right.
And and so the Instagram was supposed to be stuff for teens, and then parents started following me on Instagram. So I just do a hodgepodge there. But most of the stuff for parents is on my Facebook business page.
I love it. I love it. So thank you so much again for sharing your journeys, sharing your purpose, sharing your life. We
Thank you so
appreciate
much for having me. It's been a lot
Yes.
of fun tonight.
Yes.
I'm glad we finally connected. We've been trying to do this for a while.
For a while. I'm so grateful. So stay backstage for me for a minute and I'll be right there
Okay.
to follow up with you. Thank you. So thank you all for watching. I hope that you really paid attention to some of the nuggets, some of the jewels that Jackie dropped this evening. If you were not able to tune into the entire show, her website is there, www.jackiebrewton.com. She has a Facebook page. It is essential that we, as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, really think about the impact that we can make on a positive note to with our children, our youth, as it relates to healthy relationships and them making healthier decisions. They have so much more up against them today than we did growing up. And so we have the opportunity, especially with this resource here, to make a difference in their lives. So I'm hoping that you guys will reach out to Jackie. You will purchase copies of the book. You will sign up for the academy. I think she has master classes and things of that nature for parents as well as the youth. And so I just want to make sure that resources are made available to us each show. And so I'm so grateful for those of you all who watched this evening. Thank you so much for tuning in. And please join us next Thursday again at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you would like and share this broadcast, I meant to say that earlier and was so excited that I didn't do that. So please like and share this broadcast because somebody will be blessed by it. And remember, Life with Shenita was started with an ultimate goal to help people overcome life's challenges and to encourage them to live a vibrant life. So you guys remember that I love you, but God loves you most. He loves you best. Peace, love, and joy today and always. Again, thank you for watching. Good night.